The real danger began the night she vanished. That was what the elders would later whisper whenever the wind howled through the baobab trees. But on the night it happened, no one yet understood the mistake the village had made. In the quiet village of Kumbele, people believed many things. They believed the forest had eyes. They believed the river remembered every secret. And above all, they believed that old woman Nalia was a witch. Her hut stood alone at the far edge of the village, where the tall grass met the dark wall of the forest. No children played near her home. No women fetched water from the small well behind her hut. Even the hunters avoided the narrow path that passed by her door. People said strange things about Nalia. Some swore they had seen smoke rise from her chimney at midnight, glowing green under the moon. Others claimed they heard whispers coming from her hut when no one else was around. And the children told the most frightening stories of all. She talks to shadows, one boy once said. My brother saw bones hanging from her roof, another whispered. Her eyes glow when the moon is full, a little girl added nervously. The rumors grew like vines, twisting and spreading until the whole village believed them. No one remembered when the fear had started. Perhaps it was because Nalia never joined the village celebrations. Perhaps it was because she lived alone. Or perhaps it was simply because people fear what they do not understand. Only one person in Kumbele did not believe the stories, a boy named Kato. Kato was 12 years old, curious and stubborn, with eyes that always searched for truth behind whispers. While other children ran away whenever Nalia's name was mentioned, Kato often found himself staring toward the lonely hut at the forest's edge. He had watched her many times from afar. She did not look like a witch. She looked tired. Every evening, just before sunset, Nalia would step outside her hut and light a small fire in a circle of stones. Then she would place strange herbs into the flames. The smoke always drifted toward the forest, and every time she did this, the forest grew quiet, too quiet. Kato noticed something no one else had ever paid attention to. The nights after her fires were always peaceful. No hyenas came near the goats, no strange noises echoed from the trees, no shadows moved where shadows should not move. But the villagers never thought about these things. They only whispered. She curses the land, one farmer once muttered. She speaks with dark spirits, another said. She is waiting for the right moment to destroy us, someone warned. Fear can turn ordinary things into monsters. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, the village gathered around the large baobab tree for their nightly meeting. The elders sat in a circle, their faces serious. The village chief, Elder Bako, leaned heavily on his carved staff. He said, "We cannot ignore this any longer," gravely. Murmurs spread through the crowd. "We have all seen the signs." "What signs?" Kato whispered to his friend Tano. Tano shrugged nervously. "They say goats have gone missing. They say strange winds have blown through the farms. They say sickness has touched the cattle. Every problem, every bad thing that happened in Kumbele somehow found its way back to the same person, Nalia. She is a witch," one man declared loudly. "She must leave," another shouted. Kato felt a knot twist in his stomach. "But no one has seen her do anything bad," he said quietly. The adults turned toward him. Some laughed, others frowned. "You are only a child," one elder said dismissively. "You do not understand the ways of witches." Kato looked toward the distant edge of the village, where Nalia's hut stood in silence. A small curl of smoke rose into the darkening sky. "She has lived here longer than any of us," Kato argued. "Maybe she protects us." The crowd burst into laughter. "Protects us?" someone scoffed. "That old witch protects nothing." Elder Bako raised his hand for silence. "We will not drive her away tonight," he said slowly, "but we will watch her. If she truly brings darkness to this village, we will know soon." The meeting ended with uneasy whispers, but Kato could not sleep that night. The moon hung high above Kumbele, bright and cold. From his window, he could see the distant glow of Nalia's fire. He watched her silhouette move slowly in the flickering light. She looked older than he had ever noticed before. Her back was bent, her movement slow. Yet she walked carefully, placing herbs into the fire one by one. The smoke drifted toward the forest again. Then something strange happened. Kato saw Nalia suddenly freeze. She turned toward the trees. The wind stopped. Even the insects fell silent. For a long moment, she stood there, staring into the darkness. Then she whispered something Kato could not hear. Slowly, she walked into her hut and closed the door. The fire burned low, the smoke faded, and the forest began to move. A deep rustling spread through the trees. Branches cracked, leaves shivered. Kato's heart pounded as he stared into the darkness. For just a moment, he thought he saw something large shifting between the shadows, something that did not belong in the forest, something watching the village. Then the wind returned. The trees became still again, and the night grew quiet. Too quiet. The next morning, something strange happened. Nalia was gone. Her fire pit was cold. Her hut door hung open. Inside, there was nothing. No herbs, no tools, no bones, no dark magic, only an empty room. The villagers gathered around her abandoned home, whispering nervously. "She ran away," someone said. "She knew we were watching her." "Good riddance," another man spat. But Kato felt a chill crawl down his spine, because that night, for the first time in many years, the forest did not stay quiet. Something howled, and it was getting closer. The night after Nalia disappeared felt different. At first, no one noticed. The villagers of Kumbele went about their evening as they always did. Women cooked stews over open fires. Men returned from the fields with tired shoulders. Children chased each other through the dusty paths while laughter echoed between the huts. For a brief moment, some even felt relieved. The old woman was gone. The witch who had lived on the edge of the village for so many years had vanished like smoke. Many believed their troubles would now disappear with her. But Kato felt uneasy. Something in the air had changed. The wind carried a strange scent from the forest, damp and sour, like rotting leaves after heavy rain. The birds that usually settled into the trees at sunset seemed merciless. They circled above the village, screeching sharply before flying deeper into the forest. Even the goats refused to settle in their pen. Kato noticed these things while sitting beside his mother's cooking fire. "Why are the animals acting like this?" he asked quietly. His mother barely looked up from stirring the pot. "Animals always sense change," she said. "What kind of change?" "The kind that comes when old things leave." Her words didn't comfort him. As darkness fell, the village slowly grew quiet. One by one, fires burned low and families disappeared into their huts. Soon, the only sounds left were the whispering wind and the distant hum of insects. But that night, something else joined those sounds. A low growl. It came from the forest. Kato heard it first. He sat upright on his sleeping mat, heart racing as the sound drifted through the night air. It was deep and heavy, like the rumble of thunder trapped inside a creature's throat. Another growl followed, closer this time. The goats in the nearby pen suddenly began bleating in panic. Dogs started barking. Doors opened across the village as people stepped outside, confused and uneasy. "What was that?" someone shouted. "Did you hear it?" The growl came again, longer, angrier. Then the forest erupted with movement. Branches snapped, leaves shook violently. Something large was pushing its way through the trees. Kato ran outside just as a terrified scream echoed from the far end of the village. "My God!" a farmer cried. "Something's in the pen!" Men grabbed spears and torches, rushing toward the sound. Flames flickered wildly as shadows danced across the ground. Kato followed behind them, despite his mother shouting for him to stay back. When they reached the goat pen, the wooden gate had been torn open. The ground was churned with deep claw marks, and the goats? Half of them were gone. The remaining animals huddled together in a corner, trembling so violently their legs shook. "What could do this?" one man whispered. Hyenas were common near the forest, but this was different. The gate had not been broken. It had been ripped apart. Elder Baku arrived last, leaning heavily on his staff. His old eyes scanned the ground carefully. Then his face darkened. "These tracks," he muttered. The torchlight revealed something strange. The footprints were enormous, larger than any hyena or leopard, and they were shaped like twisted human hands. 5 long claws dug deep into the soil. A cold silence fell over the villagers. "Is it a spirit?" someone whispered fearfully. "No spirit leaves tracks," another replied. The forest growled again, but this time the sound was farther away. Whatever had attacked the goats was leaving. For now, the villagers spent the rest of the night awake. Men stood guard with spears. Fires burned brighter than usual, but the darkness beyond the village felt thicker than before. Kato sat beside the elders near the central fire, listening to their uneasy whispers. "It came from the forest," one said. "Then we must hunt it," another insisted. Elder Bako shook his head slowly. "Not yet." "Why not?" the younger hunters protested. "Because," the old chief said quietly, "something is wrong." Kato leaned closer, listening carefully. "For many years," Bako continued, "the forest has remained quiet. Too quiet. Animals avoided our land. Predators stayed far from the village. And now," he looked toward the dark trees at the edge of Kumbeli, "they return the very night Nalia disappears." The men exchanged nervous glances. "You think the witch called them?" one asked. "No," Bako replied slowly. "I think she kept them away." The words hung in the air like smoke. But most of the villagers rejected the idea immediately. "That old woman was cursed," someone scoffed. "She caused this." "Yes," another man agreed quickly. "Now that she's gone, the evil she summoned has been released." The explanation was easier to believe. Fear often prefers simple answers. But Kato couldn't stop thinking about the fires Nalia lit every evening, the herbs, the smoke drifting toward the forest, and how quiet the forest always became afterward. He stood suddenly. "I'm going to her hut." The adult stared at him. "At this hour?" his mother gasped. "Don't be foolish," one of the elders warned. But Kato had already started walking. The path toward Nalia's hut felt darker than it had ever had before. The moonlight barely reached the ground through the thick trees. When he arrived, the small house looked exactly as it had that morning, empty and silent. But something new caught his eye. The circle of stones where she once burned her fire. Inside the circle, faint symbols had been carved into the dirt. Strange patterns, swirls and shapes that seemed almost alive under the moonlight. Kato knelt closer. The carvings stretched outward toward the forest like protective lines, a barrier. Suddenly, he understood something that made his blood run cold. These were not spells meant to harm the village. They were meant to protect it. And without Nalia lighting her fire, the barrier was broken. A twig snapped behind him. Kato turned slowly. The forest stood silent. But deep between the trees, 2 glowing eyes opened, watching him. And they were not alone. Kato did not move, not even to breathe.
The glowing eyes between the trees stared back at him, unblinking and cold. For a long moment, the forest held its breath. Then the creature stepped forward. Moonlight slid across its body, revealing something that made Kato's stomach twist with fear. It was not an animal, and it was not human. Its body was hunched and long, with limbs that bent in the wrong directions. Its skin looked grey and stretched too tightly over its bones. Long claws scraped softly against the dirt as it crept closer. But the worst part was its face.
It looked almost like a man's, if a man had been twisted by something ancient and cruel. Its mouth stretched wide with too many teeth. Its glowing eyes burned like dying embers. Kato slowly backed away from the carved circle in the dirt. The creature stopped at the edge of the symbols. It tilted its head, then it growled. The sound vibrated deep in Kato's chest, but the creature did not cross the circle. It paced around it slowly, claws digging into the soil, as if something invisible still held it back. Kato realized something important in that moment. Even without the fire, some of Nalia's protection remained, but it was fading. The creature lifted its nose into the air, sniffing the wind, then it let out a low howl that echoed deep into the forest. The answer came almost immediately. More howls. Many more. Kato's heart dropped. There wasn't just one of them, there were dozens. Fear finally broke his frozen legs. He ran. Branches whipped against his arms as he raced back towards the village, lungs burning with every breath. Behind him, the forest began to stir. Leaves rustled. Footsteps moved through the darkness, not chasing him, moving toward the village. By the time Kato burst into the central clearing, several men were already awake, standing guard beside the large fire. They turned when they saw his terrified face. "What happened?" one of the hunters asked sharply. "They're coming!" Kato gasped. "What is coming?" "Creatures from the forest!" The men exchanged doubtful looks, but before anyone could question him further, a scream tore through the night. This one came from the far end of the village. The sound of wood splintering followed, then another scream, and another. Panic erupted instantly. Villagers rushed out of their huts as torches flared to life. The hunters ran toward the sound, spears raised. Kato followed again, despite the fear clawing inside his chest. They reached the goat pens first. The gate had been ripped apart, just like the night before. But this time, the creature was still there. It crouched over the body of a goat, tearing into it with savage hunger. Blood stained the dirt around it. The hunters froze. The creature slowly lifted its head. Moonlight revealed the same twisted shape Kato had seen near Nalia's hut, except this one was larger, stronger, and it was not alone. Another shape moved behind it. Then another. 3 creatures now crouched inside the pen. Their glowing eyes flickered toward the villagers. One of the hunters raised his spear. "Drive them back!" he shouted. The men charged. The first spear struck the largest creature on the shoulder. It barely reacted. Instead, it stood slowly. Its body unfolded upward until it towered over the men. Then it roared. The sound shook the ground beneath their feet. Before anyone could react, the creature lunged forward with terrifying speed. Its claws slashed across one hunter's chest. The man fell instantly. The villagers screamed. Spears stabbed wildly toward the creature, but it moved with unnatural agility, dodging the attacks with ease. Another creature leapt over the fence, landing behind the hunters. Now they were surrounded.
"Back to the fire," someone shouted. The villagers retreated quickly, dragging the injured hunter away. But the creatures did not chase them far. Instead, they watched with those burning eyes, waiting. Finally, after several tense moments, they turned and slipped back into the darkness beyond the village. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. The villagers gathered around the wounded hunter. He was breathing, but barely. "What were those things?" someone whispered. No one answered. Even Elder Bako looked shaking. Kato stepped forward slowly. "I saw one earlier," he said. All eyes turned toward him. "Near Nalia's hut." "You went there?" his mother gasped. "Yes," he said, "and I saw something else." He explained about the carved symbols around the fire pit, about the creature that would not cross the circle, about the glowing eyes watching from the forest. When he finished, the elder stood in thoughtful silence. Then Elder Bako spoke quietly. I feared this. What do you mean? One of the hunters asked. The old chief stared toward the dark forest. Long ago, he said slowly, before many of you were born, creatures like these haunted near our lands. They are called night walkers. The villagers shifted uneasily. They come from the deep forest, Bako continued, from places where the sun rarely reaches. They hunt in darkness, and they feed on fear. Why haven't we seen them before? Someone asked. The elder's eyes drifted toward the empty path leading to Nalia's hut. Because someone kept them away. The realization spread slowly through the crowd. No, one woman whispered. Yes, Bako said quietly. The old woman you all feared was guarding us. A deep howl echoed from the forest. This one was closer than before, and it was answered by many more. The creatures were gathering, and for the first time in many years, nothing stood between them and the village, except time and the faint, fading symbols left behind by the woman they had driven away. No one slept in Kumbele that night. The fires in the center of the village burned high, their flames dancing wildly as the wind pushed through the trees. Hunters stood in a circle around the village with spears and torches, their eyes fixed on the dark forest that surrounded them. Every sound made them tense. Every rustling leaf felt like a warning. Kato sat beside Elder Bako, staring into the flames as the old chief spoke in a low voice. The night walkers do not attack all at once, Bako explained. They wait. They learn the weaknesses of those they hunt. Kato swallowed hard. Then why did they come into the village? The elder looked toward the empty edge of Kumbele. Because the barrier is gone. Everyone followed his gaze. Far beyond the hut, the lonely path toward Nalia's house disappeared into darkness. For years, the villagers had believed that hut held evil. Now it felt like the only place that had ever protected them. A sudden crash broke the silence. Wood splintered. A terrified scream followed. "They're here!" someone shouted. Panic erupted.
The night walkers burst from the forest like shadows come alive. There were more of them now, many more. Their long limbs carried them across the ground with terrifying speed as they lunged toward the outer huts. One creature leaped onto the roof of a house, its claws digging into the straw as it shrieked. Another crashed through a wooden door, sending a family running into the night. The hunters charged forward. Spears flashed in the firelight. One spear struck a creature in the chest, but the monster only staggered before ripping the weapon free and throwing the hunter aside like a rag doll. Torches flew through the air as villagers tried to drive the creatures back with fire. For a moment, the night walkers hesitated. They snarled and circled the flames, their glowing eyes scanning the frightened people. Then one of them let out a deep howl. The others answered, and the attack began in full. Chaos filled Kumbele. Children cried, men shouted, women dragged the elderly toward the center fire. The night walkers moved like living nightmares between the huts, their claws slicing through wood and straw. One creature lunged toward a group of villagers, but suddenly stopped. It sniffed the air. Then it backed away slowly. Confusion rippled through the villagers. Another creature approached the central fire. It too hesitated. Its glowing eyes narrowed. It circled the flames cautiously. Kato noticed something strange. The creatures were avoiding certain areas, places where the wind carried faint traces of smoke. The same kind of smoke Nalia's herbs used to create. Kato? Elder Bako's voice broke through his thoughts. The boy looked up. You said you saw the symbols near her fire pit. Yes, show them to me. They hurried through the village as the hunters continued battling the creatures at the edges of Kumbele. When they reached Nalia's hut, the air felt colder than before. The door still hung open.
The circle of stone sat silent beneath the moon. The carved symbols glowed faintly in the dirt. Bako knelt beside them. His old fingers traced the shapes carefully. "These are not curses," he whispered. "They are words." "What does that mean?" Kato asked. "They keep dark things away." The elder's face grew pale, and they were meant to be renewed every night. Kato felt his chest tighten. "The fire?" "Yes," Bako said. "The fire strengthened the barrier, and without it," he did not finish the sentence. Both of them turned toward the forest. Something was moving between the trees. Many things. Dozens of glowing eyes stared back from the darkness. The night walkers had followed them, and this time they did not stop at the circle. The faint symbols were fading, cracking, breaking apart like dried mud. A creature stepped forward cautiously. Its claw touched the edge of the circle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it crossed the line. The barrier was gone. Bako stood quickly. "We must find her." Kato blinked in surprise. "Nalia?" "Yes," the elder said urgently. "She is the only one who knows how to stop them." "But where would she go?" The old chief looked toward the deeper forest. "There is a place beyond the river," he said quietly. "A place the elders once spoke of."
A shrine where guardians once learned the old ways. Kato's eyes widened. "You think she went there?" "I believe she knew this day might come." Behind them, the creatures began creeping closer. The hunters in the village were still fighting, but their shouts sounded weaker now. Time was running out. "If we do not bring her back," Bako said grimly, "Kumbele will not survive another night." Kato tightened his grip on the small torch he carried. "I'll go," he said. The elder stared at him. "You are only a boy." "But I'm fast," Kato replied, "and I know the forest paths." For a long moment, the old chief studied him. Then he nodded slowly. "Follow the river until you reach the broken baobab tree. Beyond that is the shrine. Find her and bring her back." A roar from the forest interrupted them. The night walkers were closing in. Kato turned and ran toward the dark trees. Behind him, the distant screams from the village echoed through the trees. Every sound pushed him forward. He followed the river just as Elder Bako had told him. The moonlight shimmered across the dark water as he raced along its edge. Soon the trees began to grow taller, thicker, older than any he had seen near the village. Then he saw it. The broken baobab tree. Its massive trunk had split in half long ago, leaving a hollow passage through its center. Beyond it, the forest opened into a quiet clearing. At the center stood a small stone shrine, and beside it, a fire burned. Kato slowed, breathing hard. An old woman sat beside the flames, grinding herbs carefully in a wooden bowl. Nalia. She looked up as if she had been expecting him. "I wondered how long it would take," she said calmly. Kato stared at her, stunned. "You knew this would happen?" She sighed and placed the bowl beside the fire. "For many years I kept them away. The night walkers fear the old wards. The smoke from the herbs strengthens the barrier between their world and ours." "Then why did you leave?" Kato asked desperately. Her eyes filled with quiet sadness. "Because the village had already decided what I was. A witch, a monster. And sometimes," she said gently, "people must see the darkness for themselves before they understand who was holding it back." Kato felt tears sting his eyes. "The village is under attack. People are getting hurt." "I know," Nalia replied. She slowly stood and lifted a small leather pouch filled with herbs. The creatures will not stop now unless the barrier is restored. Can you do it? Kato asked. Nalia looked toward the distant glow of the burning village far beyond the trees. Yes, but the wards must be placed again, around the entire village.
That will take time. A distant howl echoed through the forest. The night walkers were hunting. Nalia turned toward the path. Come, she said firmly. They walked quickly back through the forest, the firelight of the shrine fading behind them. When Kumbele finally came into view, the village was in chaos. Hunters fought desperately to keep the creatures away, while families huddled around the central fire. The moment the villagers saw Nalia step out of the forest, silence spread through the clearing. The woman they had feared, the woman they had blamed, the woman they had driven away. She walked slowly toward the center of the village, without anger, without pride, only determination. She scattered herbs into the fire. Thick white smoke rose into the air. Then she began carving new symbols into the dirt around the village. The night walkers screamed. One by one, they backed away as the barrier returned. Within minutes, the creatures vanished into the forest once more. The village was safe again. But no one spoke. They simply watched the old woman standing quietly beside the fire. Finally, Elder Bako stepped forward. We judged you wrongly, he said. Nalia looked at the frightened faces surrounding her. Then she spoke softly. The forest was never your enemy. Fear was. She turned back toward the dark trees, and though the night walkers never returned to Kumbele again, the villagers never forgot the lesson they learned. Sometimes, the person everyone fears the most is the one protecting them all along.